Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Building the Future Ready Community College, a strategic roadmap for agentic AI integration. I'm going to hand it off to Jim Cantizaro in 1 second. At the bottom of your screen, if you would like to identify yourself or tell us where you're from in the chat, I always appreciate to see where our audience is coming from. In the Q&A section, if you have any questions during the time, please enter it there. This allows your fellow participants to upvote certain questions. If for some reason we do not get to your questions over the course of this webinar, we'll be happy to follow up with answers afterwards. And with that, I will turn it over to Jim.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm your host, Jim Catanzaro. On behalf of Great AI, welcome to this webinar. We're going to focus on future-proofing your college through agentic AI. You know, when considering the recent history of artificial intelligence, we usually mark the starting point with a public release of ChatGPT, November 30, 2022. I'm sure you recall that in less than a week, over 1 million people had signed on, an adoption curve unlike anything we had ever seen in technology. Almost overnight, higher education found itself facing a paradox. Many educators feared that AI would effectively undermine the academic enterprise. Then there were others who saw in ChatGPT the potential for transformative support, actually on a scale never before imagined. That moment ushered in what we now call the era of generative AI. Large language models capable of creating human-like text, generating code, music, videos, drafting policies, even helping administrators frame speeches and faculty with lesson plans. It's the era we're likely to be in for years to come. We now know, however, that these tools, though extraordinary, are nonetheless quite limited. They're fundamentally reactive, requiring human inputs, prompts. In fact, I'm sure we all recognize how well we engineer our prompts has become the key to mastering generative AI. Now, not quite 3 years later, we're adding on a new instrumentality, one that shifts the focus from prompting to working with AI agents. In fact, AI collaborators who will do the work to achieve a wide range of tangible results. This emerging instrument is what we'll refer to here as agentic AI. What defines the new agentic AI architecture? Unlike earlier reactive systems, agentic AI, once challenged, has the capacity to do several leading things. It can interpret goals. It can devise and execute plans to meet those goals. And it has the capacity to continuously learn from feedback to ensure the fulfillment of those goals. Most importantly, agentic AI can do all of this autonomously without requiring guidance or even a nudge at any step in the process. This is, I'm sure you will agree, truly a revolutionary change. So here's our starting point today. Agentic AI has the potential to act as our digital collaborators across nearly every dimension of our work as educators. In enrollment, AI agents can assess student demand. They can powerfully prospect. They can personalize outreach and follow up across multiple channels, refining and scaling up the work of admissions teams. In instruction, AI agents can help faculty personalize learning, actually do most of the work of traditional teaching assistants. In support of student success, AI agents can sniff out learning and retention challenges. They can prod students toward existing support services, and they can track outcomes, providing advisors and faculty with real-time assistance in addressing those challenges. So for students, it's my thought, AI agents can become their course companions. In time, they can become their career companions. And for all of us in finance, AI agents can model scenarios, forecast revenues, detect inefficiencies faster than traditional systems. And for presidents and senior leaders, AI agents can deliver powerful decision intelligence, synthesizing data, weighing trade-offs, evaluating programs, and surfacing cost control recommendations, all in a matter of minutes. So what's definitive here? AI agents can make these data-informed decisions without our human prompts. So our discussion today will be about learning how to collaborate with agents capable of deciding and acting in pursuit of high-value goals. Institutional goals, individual goals, our goals. Of course, I want to say this right up front, as with any major technological leap, and I'm sure our guests were going to say this is true, there are clearly risks we must manage, ethical frameworks to uphold, and shifts in college culture to navigate. But let me suggest this to get us going. I believe agentic AI has the potential to become not just a new tool in higher education, but a true partner in advancing our mission. So it's time for a poll. If you would, please put in the chat whether you have already experimented not with generative AI, but with an AI system you've acquired or created that plans, carries out essential tasks, and follows through to goal achievement, all without your prompting. We'll come back later on to your responses, as well as to any comments or questions you might include as well in the chat. As we consider both the promise and the challenges of agentic AI, let's hear directly from leaders who are shaping its use in research and on the ground. We are very fortunate today to have with us two such voices. First, Greg Hale, JD, former distinguished president of Broward College, who now serves as senior fellow, MR School, Harvard University. Recently, Greg led the highly acclaimed Achieving the Dream study on AI in community colleges. And then we'll hear from Dr. Klein Nemuo, the 10th president of America's first community college, Joliet Junior College. Klein is well known for pushing the boundaries of innovation while championing bold initiatives focused on community engagement and student success. Together, I expect they'll help us move from concept to actively exploring how AI can strengthen student outcomes and institutional performance. So, Greg, let's start with you.
Sure.
Tell us what we've learned from the ATD study you led this past summer.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jim. Klein, it's a privilege to serve with you as well, and to your audience. Thank you for taking some time. So one of the things, as you described, Jim, is that there are a lot of features to AI and agentic AI, and as college leaders, whether they be presidents or perhaps an appointee within an institution who's taken responsibility for driving the use of AI, one of the realities is just very simple. Notwithstanding this transformative technology that seems to be penetrating both our work lives as well as our personal lives in ways like we've never seen, the day-to-day operations of an institution continue. All of the things that have been a challenge or had occupied our time before November of 2022 and kept us busy then continue to do so. And so a significant challenge in and of itself is finding the time and thinking about what does the appropriate framework look like and developing one that makes sense for a given institution. Jim, that was a significant part of the work that I had the chance of chairing with Achieving the Dream. You talked a little bit about it, but I'll take a little bit of a deeper dive as well. The task force developed a framework that we called Creating the AI-Enabled Community College, a roadmap for using generative AI to accelerate student success. In talking to college presidents, one of the things that's very clear is that even presidents and leaders who otherwise don't have positions that are specifically dedicated to AI are still trying to grapple with what it is, how to use it, and how to distinguish which tools are going to be most appropriate. So a significant portion of that work we actually were able to do by way of this framework. And I already see the question coming in. We will make sure that we have the white paper and framework placed into the chat so that everyone has access to it. But we really broke it into 8 different categories in terms of how we need to be thinking about the development and usage of AI. Category and action area 1, as we call it, was demonstrating strategic leadership. What does it look like at the strategic leadership, whether it be at the board and presidential level and perhaps leadership team level, to be conscious of the leveraging of AI for strategic purposes? And those are purposes that would hopefully penetrate all areas of an institution. Establishing ethical AI governance was action area number 2. And you talked about this a little bit, Jim. Making sure that we're aware of the dangers, making sure that we're aware of how this impacts our students. Part of the reality that we face here is much like other historical material advances in technology, whether it was the PC or whether it was the internet. We often saw low-income students falling behind at a greater rate, or those who have access to those technologies and can really benefit from them, those being from the upper income quartiles. And so we have to be conscious of what the ethical governance of AI looks like and making sure that we're bringing everyone along. Action area 3, including develop assessments to measure AI user impact, i.e., what does it look like, as most leaders, good leaders are really focused on measuring the outcomes and impact in the usage of these tools, especially being that they're so new. We have to think about what it looks like to have baseline criteria and baseline data points that we can leverage over time. Action area number 4, building staff capacities. This is very, very much hopefully top of mind as it relates to college leaders, and certainly college presidents. But we made sure that this was important in the framework as well. Not everyone is at the same level when it comes to the usage of these tools. In fact, one of the elements that we point out is in many ways, students might be ahead of faculty when it comes to the usage of these tools. And so what does it look like to create balance among faculty leaders, administrative leaders, so that we are at minimum at par, and at best, as we should be, ahead, so that we can help our students get to the next level? Action area number 5 was supporting professional learning and faculty engagement. So what does it look like to incorporate it into our professional learning practices? And what does it look like to use these tools from a faculty engagement perspective? Action area number 6 was redesigning the curriculum. Now, in this task force, I should have mentioned earlier that as I chaired it, we also had a number of business leaders and a number of incredible college presidents from across the country represented, as well as leaders specifically in the AI and generative AI and agentic AI fields. What became incredibly apparent was the need to make sure that we had flexible curriculum that balanced with the changes in AI and AI skill sets that are needed. What we're watching right now is a time where skills will atrophy faster than they ever have. I had one college president share, I thought was so profound. This is the slowest AI will ever move and technology will ever move today. And if you think about how quickly skills change, needs change for the jobs that the talent that we're developing seek, we have to be thoughtful about the curriculum that is amenable to those changes and can do so in a timely fashion. Action area number 7 was leveraging AI for workforce alignment. That speaks to, in many ways, the curriculum that I just described. But what does it look like to make sure that, again, we are closely tied to the workforce needs, especially in high technology fields? Now, I say that almost with some hesitancy because what we're watching is every field is being impacted by AI in some way. And we have to be conscious of making sure that we're perpetuating that as well. And then finally, investing in student success, which was action area number 8 through AI. How do we make sure that AI is being leveraged for all of our student success purposes, as well as operational efficiencies? So I share that with you as we kind of launch this discussion around institutions. Sometimes among the squirrel, it's hard to find time to build frameworks. And so a real gift of this work was being able to provide a framework that has enough flexibility to fit within the mold of many different types of institutions, but enough concreteness to help with a clear framing that can be shared with board members, certainly leadership teams, and those throughout a given institution.
Well, let me just follow up by asking you this. Did you not find out that very few leaders in higher education actually are working hard to incorporate AI?
Yeah, so it's
Numbers were
interesting.
low, weren't they?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, as I've spent time with college presidents, and whether it would be sharing this information or as well as those who have been engaged in some level of work with AI, did a recent poll, if you will, with presidents, and one of the things that became very, very clear is that many of them are, if you had a scale of 1 to 10, most of them are at probably a 5 or less when it comes to the integration of AI, both at the student success level and or at the operational efficiency level. And that's before realizing what's out there. And unfortunately, sometimes those numbers even declined when realizing the potential and what really exists in the world of AI that institutions could be leveraging. And so, because, and this kind of feeds into the challenges that we see with students as well, but just as much leaders of institutions, it is moving so incredibly fast. And the recognition that finding a way to build a foundation of knowledge at a time when the knowledge is changing so quickly is quite challenging and reasonably challenging, which is one of the reasons why we decided to develop the task force at ATD and to give that foundation platform to colleges, community colleges across the country.
Well, Klein, you're on the ground there. So, what possibilities do you see for introducing agentic AI actually into college administration and operations at a faster pace to keep pace with the development of AI?
Sure. Yeah, great question, Jim. I just want to send a shout out before I respond to that question to those responsible for this particular webinar. Great DI, appreciate you bringing us together. Jim, appreciate the invitation to participate alongside Greg here. And Greg, just I think many will look back on the study you did with ATD, along with the other college presidents you referenced, as critical. I think it's one of those reports and one of those studies that we will continue to refer back to as a roadmap, if you will, to be sure that we're on the right track. So just Greg, kudos to you. Congrats on all your success, and really honored to be serving on this panel with you today. There's one area before I respond directly, Jim, to that question, and I think we don't spend enough time talking about action area number 2 that Greg referenced in this. Not only the ethical or perhaps responsible implementation of AI and all of its related technologies, but the systems and structures we put around it to protect its implementation, to ensure that we have cross-representation, cross-functional representation rather, as we deploy these revolutionary technologies across our organizations. Now, granted, we recognize as college presidents, as CEOs, as chancellors, as heads of the organizations, our role matters, right? Leadership matters, especially when we're attempting to do some things that will disrupt the systems and structures of higher education, of teaching and learning, of research, of fill in the blank, right, of our world. This is indeed a revolutionary technology. But true innovation might not necessarily come from the top of the organization, right? We have many college university presidents on the call today. In the chat, I noticed we've got individuals from all levels of the organization. At JJC, we've done our absolute best to honor action area number 2 before deploying any of these really cool tools, right? It was important for us to create a cross-functional task force and to support our faculty's efforts to create a governance structure of their own to ensure the responsible and ethical use, implementation, deployment of all of these revolutionary tools. So as an organization, I think one of the most important things that we did, recognizing the power of AI, recognizing that our students, our faculty, our staff are using it right now to create and maintain and support spaces whereby these technologies could flourish, but also receive the guidance of those cross-functional teams representing all levels of the organization. So let's start there. We're an industry of really smart people. So let's create a space as leaders of the organization. Let's support that space. Let's resource those spaces to ensure that this technology not only is deployed responsibly, but the effects are maximized throughout our organization. So, Jim, we've had several conversations about technology, you and I've been invited to speak about different things that we've done at JJC, and a couple of them we're really proud of. But at a much higher level, there are two things for me, right? There are two things. The chance that this technology creates a truly personalized educational experience for all students is a real possibility. And that is the most exciting thing. Jim, on one of the meetings or webinars we were at, I described this vision, and I did so at South by Southwest as well as a partner or invited guest of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who's also doing some incredible work in this space. And the vision is this: if AI is truly to achieve the equitable outcomes we all want AI to achieve, right? We don't want it to exacerbate the phenomenon of stratification in higher education, right? We want it to be a tool that truly achieves equitable outcomes. It is the only tool, my opinion, that can achieve truly personalized learning, where one instructor, one faculty member, one professor can produce an instructional artifact and not have to perfectly customize it for every single learner in their class or in their lecture hall. So imagine a professor produces a single case study. We should be able to, at this point, feed it into an agent, agentic or otherwise, that then outputs that particular case study 25 different ways that aligns with a learner's specific and unique learning profile. And that
Wow, that's
profile,
powerful. That's
powerful. Thank you. That profile can include reading level. It can include all levels of academic preparation, right, and preparedness. There could be cultural components built into the learner's profile, could be all the services that individual learner needs related to our Disability Resource Center or our Student Wellness Center, or fill in the blank, kind of all the things that comprise them, right? All of those independent variables that comprise their learning profile. AI should at this point be able to take that case study and customize an output that is specific to them in the format they need, in the modality that's most conducive to their learning profile. That vision is something we're working toward at JJC. And we are very close, along with some of our partners, large and small, to creating essentially what you've described as an agent, Jim, that will allow our faculty to essentially, create multiple versions of themselves that present customized academic artifacts, instructional artifacts to each and every one of their students. Now, let me just say this. I was actually comforted, before I conclude these initial remarks, that most of you answered no to the agentic AI examples. I was actually quite comforted. But my guess is that many of you are experimenting. And my challenge to all of you as leaders in higher ed is to create those spaces, resource those spaces, protect those spaces, because once you perfect, once you improve, create all of those different technologies, once that agent is to the point where it can then be released into the wild, that space will have been the most important part of the process. And we've got several initiatives that exist in these so-called labs that we've created. Jim, CyberCline is one of those, right? I've digitized myself. I've uploaded myself, my consciousness
I'll have to show that, by the
to the
way.
internet. I don't know that I'm willing to do that. CyberCline exists in the lab and to just a few select individuals, but our staff and our faculty are using it to understand what's possible, right? It's a version of me that you can interact with that knows more about JJC than I will ever know. It also knows about my family, my academic background, my professional background. So students and faculty can interact with me on a personal level as well. But the real power behind that, not just a gimmick, the real power behind that is that instruction will be personalized. And I'll get to the second part, but I've talked too much. So that's the proactive
I
part.
love what
Jim,
you've
I'm going to
said.
toss it back to you.
Now, here's what I hear in it, and I think Greg said it as well. I think the success on campus is going to be when we get past the notion that AI is going to replace people to the understanding that it's going to become their trusted partner, and it's going to accelerate their work rather than diminish their work. It's going to enable them to do things that they would love to do, but just can't do when you have 40 students in a class. Can you really personalize instruction? Not really, but you can if you have a powerful assistant like agentic AI. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I think it deserves emphasis. First of all, let me just say, Klein, that is what you just described, I think, is a prototype of ambition for a leader in an institution. I would suggest that the pace with which you are moving is really incredible, and it is something to really be shared more often. And I'm really glad to be sitting here with you. I think, Jim, to your point, we are actually in somewhat of a philosophical inflection point in these early days of AI. As you read, whatever you're reading, the Times, the Journal, you can see philosophically that there are some employers who think that AI is about the opportunity to reduce human capital and talent within their companies, within their organizations. And I would argue the other side of that inflection point is that it's an opportunity to actually increase capacity for talent within our organizations. And frankly, to fulfill some of the ambitions, some of which have been described by Klein and we've touched on, of organizations like our colleges. What's it look like to finally have a tool that can be leveraged to bridge those gaps, whether they be in opportunity or whether they be in success, especially when we know that the talent exists, but the tools don't, or perhaps the talent exists, but the number of faculty members, the number of advisors, the number of other forms of talent simply don't. So the capacity to now contextualize the talent of our faculty around every single student that we intend to serve is remarkably powerful. And I don't think that there's a tool historically that brings that same opportunity to us. That's the upside. That's the really important part. The potential downside is it is so new and so fast that not everyone is where Klein is and his institution is. So the question becomes, we have to be thoughtful around training our talent, i.e. our institutional talent, so that we can make sure that we're developing the talent that is our students. Those two things go hand in hand, right? We can't have one without the other. One of the things that we talked about in the ATD study was the fact that many students overtly feel and recognize that they are ahead of some of the staff and some of the faculty at our institutions, right? And that's difficult. And for those who are graduating with the recognition that that is something that employers are looking for and having a hard time, as you think about what I just said, you have employers who are asking this question, do I need talent, human talent, or do I need AI? And if we don't produce the talent that makes it crystal clear that, i.e., I'm a graduate and you need me because of my capacity to leverage AI, then we're creating an extra hurdle for our students at the end of the day. So what does it look like for our institutions to leverage tools, whether they be the ATD report or other types of tools out there or models like Klein is leading? What does it look like for our institutions to make sure that our own talent, i.e. advisors, faculty, administrators, have the developed skills in this space so that they can be the conduits for our students at the end of the day and who inevitably want the great jobs that our employers are seeking. It's all tied to AI at this point. We're watching a lot of the data tell some stories, not great stories, by the way. As I mentioned, some employers finding the need to replace human capital. And then you also have some data that speaks to frankly, the challenge as it relates to new graduates getting jobs because arguably they're being replaced by AI. I think it's a different philosophy that we drive, especially now we're talking about mission, right? It is fundamentally our responsibility to make sure that our students, particularly in the community college space, are not left behind. It is fundamentally our responsibility to take the not deficit mindset, but the aggressive mindset of how does this tool become one that lifts our students in ways that others haven't. One of the things that we talk about as well, and we touched on this just a little bit, but I really want to make sure that we take this home, is that as our leaders of institutions, we have to be thoughtful around what it looks like to measure this progress. Rarely are we at a time where we can start to really baseline the advent of a technology of this type. So here we are, we're really only a couple of years in. Where are our students today, frankly, in many forms without the use and proper leveraging of AI? And where will they be over time? As the tools change, we need to be conscious around, are we adapting to those tool changes so our students are benefiting from the greatest forms of these technologies? Now, they will get cheaper, but they are ubiquitous already and need to be conscious of what it looks like to continue to bend with that. I know it's a lot, but it's all critically important. And again, hopefully the framework that we provided provides a starting point for most of our institutions.
Well, here are two places that I think we can move forward. I'll just throw this out and see what you think, either of you. And one of them is, the operations of the institution, the finances of the institution, the operations of the institution. And the other is, I would say, student services. It seems to me that those are two places where we can move forward pretty aggressively without any fear, or without much fear anyway, that we're going to undercut any part of the academic enterprise. We're going to keep the integrity of learning that we've developed over centuries. Actually, we're going to keep it solid and strong. Because as much as I'm with personalizing instruction, absolutely there, we still have to convince faculty, we have to convince lots of people that this is something they can do and should do. Whereas I think we could walk right into the president's office or the vice president of business, right? Or even student services and say, hey, I think we can move forward, we can accelerate the work that we do, because we can understand better what our financials are and operationally how we can be more effective. What do you think?
Jim, I'll jump in on this and start at just a much higher level and point back to again Greg's report and his team's report rather with ATD and the importance of action area 4 and 5, right? To ensure that as leaders of the organization, we're truly resourcing the curiosities, right? The interests of both our staff and our faculty at all levels, right? That's critical. As you referenced in November of 22, when ChatGPT's interface was first, unleashed on the world, that was an important moment. And since then, most have embraced, if not experimented, with not only ChatGPT, but its competing technologies as well, whether that be Copilot or Grok or any one of many, large language models. I think as we consider what the future will hold, I think it's important to look back before November 22, what we've done is, push people into the most advanced of classes without building a solid understanding of not only the technology, the infrastructure, the science and the programming that goes into these technologies. We've skipped a thorough understanding of the earlier technologies that ChatGPT and others were built on, right? So we skipped the predictive analytics step in this whole equation. Now, many institutions have been using strategic scheduling software for many years to optimize and create efficient schedules, but not all of them. Not all of them know exactly how many English 101 sections to offer and which mix of modalities might maximize their enrollment for fall 2025. Not all of them, right? Most institutions were not using a form of machine learning before November of 22. So all of a sudden, we have this magical sorcery-like tool that is not only powerful, but is accessible in a way that I can only compare to Gopher versus Netscape Navigator, or Gopher versus Mosaic back in the day. All of a sudden, a user interface that is easy to use that is now accessible to everyone. But no real understanding of predictive analytics, no real understanding of machine learning, two important predecessors of artificial intelligence, all forms, right?
Excellent point.
So last point about that. Yeah, thank you, Michael. We'll have to bring back Gopher to give our kids a real appreciation of what the internet was like before the World Wide Web. So that's really, what I challenge us to do. And last point about this, Jim, is, AI and its related technologies have the great potential to, look, we have way too much time to be busy. The pandemic taught us how many meetings we could schedule into one day, and many of us have been reluctant to let go of that. So we have way too much time to be busy and not enough time to be brilliant. AI can largely handle, especially agentic AI, can largely handle the hundreds of emails that we send and receive every day, this calendaring that needs to happen to support many of us. The reports, the projects, the presentations can largely be handled by agentic AI, and we can, as leaders, maximize the creativity that comes with our humanity, or really should, right? We're not meant to sit behind these desks all day. If any of you are like me, I can't wait to get out of this office. In fact, when I hit leave the meeting, I'm going straight down the hall, walk the concourse, and say hi to students. But if we're going to solve the complex problems in higher ed and in society, we need to capitalize on some of the functionality. And those are some of the things we're doing at JJC, whether it be strategic scheduling, which we're making some great advances in that space, or proactive early alert systems as well. And there are any number of companies that are providing tools that can really help in that space.
Wow, great insight. Your reflections, Greg.
Yeah, Jim. So one of the things that is obvious to all of us is that the world is being disrupted by AI, and hopefully, for the most part, favorably. There'll be some challenges for sure that we have to be conscious of and build the right guardrails, but hopefully favorably. And oftentimes, as leaders, there might be disruption in the outside world, but inside, things continue to move as they have because there's just so many things going on. Klein, you talked about the meetings, for example, but the truth is, we know that in higher education, as leaders, regardless of where you are leading within the institution, it feels like there is no time to think. It is only time to do. And I won't prescribe this because institutions can be so different. But what we have to be conscious of is, how do we pause? How do we find room to pause and ask ourselves, should I, whatever seat I sit in, be doing this? Or is there an opportunity for agentic AI to free up capacity and to do what I hope for at scale, that which I could never do by myself? How do I stop, pause, and leverage the tools that exist today? That's how we create capacity, but it takes it. We have to have a consciousness and a communication strategy of what it looks like to pause and ask ourselves, should I be doing this person, or should a tool that exists be doing this, right? And it's a really, and it is extremely hard to do in a world where there are so many changes of so many different types and all the day-to-day obligations that come with it. So leaders have to find a way to do that. And again, that can be, it doesn't have to be the president. It could be others within the institution to be thoughtful about it as they think about their roles. One of the reasons that's really important, and there are many, but one of them, and to your point around operational efficiency, Jim, is that you have this moment where all of our institutions are trying to figure out, how do we get more resources, right? How do we get more resources? And that will always be a charge that we're thoughtful around. But what we have the capacity for now, in a very real, intangible, and I would argue measurable way, is how do we do more with agentic AI? Even if it doesn't mean more financial capital, but with the tools that exist, is there our capacity to do more? You mentioned the word fear, Jim. Is there fear? There really isn't fear, or is there? Look, we're talking about people here, and there's going to be worry about whether or not this is going to be causing the displacement of my job, or will my job exist? And so part of any change management strategy must be around the communication of why this is important to our students and why this will impact you positively, right? We have to be thoughtful around the coupling of those two realities. If we can do that, of course, and we can talk about, this could be a whole nother session, right? But you start to eliminate those barriers that come with the change that we know has to be had with this time and with this technology. And so the thoughtfulness around that communication, when it comes to our talent, how it will free up their capacity to make a greater difference, which they all seek to do, to support our students, and then to provide those efficiencies. Think about your under-resourced institutions that now potentially have the tools, if leveraged appropriately, to create more opportunity, more contextualization that maybe millions of dollars would have been required to do before, but now you just need the right agentic AI tools. And then to the point that I raised earlier, is having the consciousness to pause, stop, and ask yourself, is there an opportunity to leverage the technology to make a far greater difference than I could for any given activity?
Well, let me try something here. Let's say that most presidents or leaders have weekly or near weekly cabinet meetings. Why not take every agenda item and maybe start off with asking the question, hey, could this agenda item be handled by agentic AI? Or can we, in partnership with agentic AI, handle it? And that might be a way right there that we can get past this oppression that we suffer under, that every week there are a whole series of things that have to be done and have to be done, and they fall on the leadership team to get them done. Let's have a partner out there, a high resource partner that can deliver for them. What do you think? Any merit there?
I think it's a fair strategy. And what I'll expand it to is, what's it look like to create a cadence of consciousness around leveraging AI for the institution? Some might say, I need a person to drive this effort. And what I would argue is, whether it's a person or some other group of people to be thoughtful around what it looks like throughout the institution. One of the things we talk about in the task force report as well is that you don't want this to be the kind of thing that gets siloed. For example, you don't want it to be, some might initially think we should have our head of IT control this, and it'll just be in the IT department. And the real question for an institution is, because of the pervasiveness of this work and the opportunity for efficiency throughout an institution, what does it look like to drive this throughout the institution and making sure that it's not a siloed endeavor? And so there has to be some thought. I've seen where folks have deans who might be in charge of these. I've seen VPs who might be in charge of these efforts. And so, without getting into the operational structure of who does it, I think the question that leadership has to ask is, how do we do this in a way that ensures a cadence that is inclusive of this reality, of these changes that are necessary, as well as a pervasiveness that's allowed throughout the institution and doesn't leave it in a siloed fashion that's only inclusive of just a few.
Well, I love it.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in there, Greg. That's
Please, jump
a
in.
number of great points. One of my notes here just referenced how competitive the landscape is right now. So if you as a leader have a preference of a particular tool, it's probably best not to let on about that, because the marketplace is just so competitive. And so, with that said, I want to send a special shout out to our future robot overlords, Siri, Alexa, ChatGPT, Copilot, Grok, Gemini, and whatever sorcery allows my car to drive itself. Eventually they'll look back on this webinar, Greg, and they'll look upon us favorably because we've honored them, our future robot overlords. But create those spaces, right, whereby faculty and staff can experiment with all different types of AI, because they are so very different. And the only maybe caveat or asterisk I would add to that is, as the adoption has been so quick and widespread, there hasn't necessarily been an emphasis on protecting all of our data as well. I've worked with several vendors who, in fact, prioritize privacy, higher education compliance, like FERPA, for example. And many of the most popular AIs have not necessarily focused on that. But many argued that in the early days and adoption of the World Wide Web and all of its supporting technologies, right? The philosophy of the web was that it was really open access, right? And the wild, wild west, so to speak. So I would encourage all of you as leaders on this call to, during the adoption period, still prioritize safety and security of your college communities, data, and privacy.
Extremely important right now. And we, of course, read about so many cases where that isn't the case, where protections haven't been put in place. But most companies now that we deal with through the Higher Education Research and Development Institute, they're really keenly aware of this. And they've taken the necessary steps to protect institutions and the faculty, staff, and students of the institutions. We're in a great time. I don't know, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said this because, of course, COVID was coming at us, but who would have ever dreamed that November 30th, 2022, a revolution would start, and in a way unprecedented, a breakneck speed of adoption. It's really just an extraordinary time. My own concern, just sitting back and watching it now as a retired college president, is, are we going to take full advantage of it? Or are we going to let others, grab on, and they can change the higher ed landscape pretty quickly, especially under today's terms, where we have so many forces that are fracturing the higher education world. Did I go too far there?
I don't think so. I don't think you went too far. I think, look, the data tells us that there are not a lot of opportunities like we have now, right? We know that 50 years ago, the bottom quartile of income earners had about 6% of their kids going to college. Uh, that number is now grown maybe by somewhere between 8 and 10%. So let's call it, 13, 14, 15%. Top quartile of income earners has gone from 40% to about 60%. We've seen the gap widen. We all know on this that this is not an issue of talent. This is an issue of opportunity.
Absolutely.
And when we know the history and the data tells this story, we have to be conscious of leaning into opportunities that can help bridge those opportunity gaps. And this might be it. In fact, most will say, and I haven't heard any contrarian to this, that this may very well be the greatest opportunity for us to seize to support our students. Now, by the same token, the challenge is how do we ensure, and you frame this, Jim, appropriately, that we don't miss it? And so much of what the context requires, whether we're having discussions around, do we have the resources to do this, or do we create the time to do this, or how do we persuade our faculty or staff to do this? And as a leader, the response is we can't afford not to.
Absolutely.
And so this is the hard part of the work. It is, again, a true privilege to see a leader like Klein doing what he's been able to do in relatively short order. I know he knows he had a lot of work to do, but as our leaders do, you have to start the work. And in light of the climb that we know that we are supporting for our students, I would argue that this is one of the greatest opportunities that we have to help facilitate that climb.
Absolutely. That's why we had Klein on this on this webinar, because he has stepped out in a rather dramatic way. But we need to do it, I think, across the community college movement for a reason that was given before. And that is that employers are going to want our students when they graduate to come to them fully prepared, AI prepared, not just prepared in the classic terms that we've had. And we need to be sure that we model for them and we teach them how best to use these great tools that we have. And students can become companions of agentic AI systems, and they can have that companionship throughout their lives now, and certainly into their careers. I have a good friend who's the vice president of human resources for Porsche and Volkswagen. And she says worldwide, employers, yes, especially in the automotive industry worldwide, this is the #1 demand they're making, AI competence.
That's right.
So I thank you very much. Do you have any closing comments that either of you would like to make? We've got 5 more minutes here, and I'm looking here to see if we have any questions that have jumped up that we haven't answered. So what do you think, Klein?
I think the next 2 or 3 years will be really important as it relates to the technology to bring us closer to some of these revolutionary tools. And what I mean specifically by that is the whole human-computer interaction field, I think, is poised to take a big leap forward, whether that be through wearable devices or otherwise. Right now, the way we interact with these magical tools and these magical technologies is still not natural enough, right? That we type on this keyboard, that we pick up our phones and use our thumbs. None of those things are natural ways to interact with technology, whether it be voice commands, gesturing. I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see more companies, potentially in the AI space, invest even more in wearable technology that allow us to bridge that gap and make the technology itself more accessible.
I'm looking forward to it. Greg, what are your final comments?
Yeah, I would say couple things. Institutions, stay close. We haven't touched on this a lot, but it's important. Stay close to your employer community, to the folks that hire your students. Make sure that you are staying close enough to understand, because how quickly this is moving, how quickly they are moving in terms of the types of skills that they're looking for and the types of talent. Don't give them a reason to choose AI instead of a student. Make sure they understand that AI will be better because of the talent that you develop that is adjacent to those AI tools, right? That is critical at this inflection point as employers are thinking about what it looks like in terms of leveraging talent that you provide, potentially in opposition to AI tools as they develop. That's part of the argument that we have to be able to make. We've touched on this a little bit, but a little bit of concreteness too. AI and agentic AI are being adopted at paces faster than the PC was adopted materially, both in the personal life and in professional life. It is being adopted at a faster rate than the internet as it relates to personal life and workplace and professional life. And, I started my career as a litigator years ago, and I used to do cases called injunctive relief matters. And injunctive relief matters has an important prong to it. It's when you are trying to stop an immediate and irreparable harm from occurring.
Wow.
And I would argue that we are in a time, as much positivity that can be backed by this work, it's just as much we should be concerned about preventing further immediate and irreparable harm. We have an obligation that as leaders in this space to make sure that not only does no one fall behind in light of the pace with which technology is moving, but we leverage it in a way that makes sure that we bridge gaps of opportunity and ensure that those with talent don't lose opportunities simply because we don't have AI and the skills necessary and the tools necessary in front of them. Thank you
Wow,
very
that's
much, Jim,
beautiful.
for the opportunity.
That's beautiful. Thank you both, Klein and Greg. Just beautiful comments and timely and important comments. And thank you all for joining us on this webinar. And maybe we'll do a follow-up at some point because things are moving so fast. We'll have to. Anyway, have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.